So Trump just called his own Supreme Court picks a disgrace to their families for voting down his tariff policies. But the real story is what his Commerce Secretary's sons were doing behind the scenes, making millions and millions and millions of dollars. Let's get right to it. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about the tariffs. We're talking about the Supreme Court striking down Trump's tariffs. Liberation Day. This was the day that America was supposed to be wealthy again. The Supreme Court, just the other day, yesterday, came out and said, no way, America will not be wealthy again. They voted it down 6-3 when Trump declared the trade deficit an emergency and used the word regulate to mean that he can import or he can tax imports. That is the area of contention. Because when Trump used EPA, he imposed taxation. However, Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice Roberts, as well as the 6 people that voted, agreed that the use of the term regulate does not mean that he can tax. That is the issue. The words tariff and duty never appears in EPA, which makes it unlawful for Trump to tax people on the basis of that particular rule, EPA. The 6 justices struck it down, including Gorsuch as well as Barrett, both of which were Trump's appointees. They got struck down. But here's what's currently standing and what's currently struck down. Liberation Day. Remember this day? It was the day that we all thought that we were going to have the ERS, like the External Revenue Services. We thought that it was no longer going to be IRS. We thought that it was just going to get abolished. We said because we're collecting so much money, this is going to be great for America. We taxed China up to 145%. We came after Mexico. We were getting money from Canada, all under EPA. But Supreme Court just struck it down. This is the majority of Trump's tariff agenda. Over $130 billion was collected. Now, I will say that, still standing is the steel aluminum tariffs from Section 232. Certain, first term China tariffs under Section 301. These laws are actually used with the word duty, which means that they can enforce these taxes. It's legal. They can do that. But what's in question is $130 billion under EPA. So within hours, Trump got the win. The Supreme Court was making this ruling, or that they ruled against him, and Trump signed immediately a 10% global tariff under Section 122 of the Trade Act. And just recently, he increased that to now 15%. So Trump can increase it. The cap, like I said, is 15%, but he can do it for up to 150 days. Now, the Secretary Besson has already come out and said, hey, I'm not looking, for any tariff revenue or refunds to be done, because what we're going to do, we're going to make a shift, and we're going to change that particular ruling to different sections of the taxation law that we have the right to be able to regulate, or not regulate, but we have the option to now tax under those particular provisions. But the biggest story of them all is the leader, the architect of this tariff policy itself, Howard Lutnick, the same guy that was in the Epstein files. Now, Howard Lutnick is Trump's Commerce Secretary, one of the main architects of the Trump policy. Before joining his administration, he ran an organization called Cantor Fitzgerald for over 30 years. When he became Commerce Secretary, he handed the firm to his sons, Brandon and Cal. Okay, 2 sons, lovely sons. And after Liberation Day, Cantor Fitzgerald started buying tariff refund rights from companies that were bleeding in cash due to the tariffs. They paid, catch this, y'all, catch this, they paid 20 to 30 cents on the dollar. So a company that paid $10 million in tariffs got $2 to $3 million in cash that day in exchange for their rights to a future refund if the Supreme Court was to rule against it, which they did. Cantor said that they had the capacity to buy hundreds of millions of dollars in refund claims. Now the Supreme Court strikes the tariffs down. Those claims are worth the full dollar. That's 3 to 5x return on investment. The father championed the tariff policy publicly. The sons bet against them privately. The question isn't whether this is legal. The question is whether you think the Commerce Secretary's sons just happened to bet right, or whether they knew something you didn't. For the sake of argument, it is important to note that the Supreme Court didn't kill the tariffs alone. They told the president to use the right tool, a different tool, a tool that just makes sense. And he already found one. But while your prices may be going up, even though headline inflation has come down, someone was making 3 to 5 times their money betting on that exact ruling. Sounds a little bit like a conflict of interest to me, but I'll let you judge. I want you all to like and subscribe to the show so that you'll get the updates of what's taking place. But I would love to hear your feedback on this issue. Do you think that Howard Lutnick or his sons should be able to make a bet like this when he's the architect of it itself?